Does talking about your money make you cringe? Are you tired of fighting about finances? Do you want to stop sabotaging your financial happiness? Then you are in the right place. Welcome to Breaking Money Silence, a podcast series aimed at helping all of us talk more openly about money. Your host, Kathleen Kingsbury, is doing what she does best. As a young girl, she was scolded for talking too much to her neighbors in class. After years of trying to be quiet, she discovered that speaking up about taboo topics is her strength. International speaker, author, and founder of KBK Wealth Connection, Kathleen understands money and our relationship with it. She is a wealth psychology expert who has helped thousands of advisors and clients communicate more effectively about money. Now, listen to Kathleen as she assists today's guest in busting their favorite money myth wide open.
I am so excited to have my guest on today, Ryan Lane. He's the senior editor at a national nonprofit called American Student Assistance. I've worked with Ryan on and off for probably almost the last decade, which is kind of scary. In his role, Ryan oversees the development of articles, infographics, course materials for the organization's free education finance support program, SALT. And working with internal and external subject matter experts, Ryan creates content that simplifies the world of college financing and helps families successfully plan for, pay for, and repay higher education expenses. Over the past 3 years, and I didn't know this till I got his bio, Ryan has written about student loans as a co-author of the U.S. News and World Report blog, The Student Loan Ranger. So welcome, Ryan, to the call.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to chat with you today about your myth. The myth you brought to the call that you want to bust wide open is parents must protect their children from college financing decisions. It sounds so like luminous, like. So tell the people who are listening in to the podcast today, kind of what motivated you to bring that particular myth to bust open today?
Well, I think this is actually a perfect time to talk about this myth. I'm not sure what release date you'll actually have for this, but we're recording this, if I'm allowed to pull back the curtain a little bit.
You are.
All right, perfect. On October 2nd, the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, opens each year on October 1st, and it's great to submit that as early as possible. So right now, we're really at the very beginning of when some of these financing discussions and financing decisions are taking place. And it really just made a lot of sense to me to dive into that area a little bit and talk about how some families might handle those decisions or perhaps not handle those decisions, and what potentially may make sense for people to do moving forward.
So when are those forms due? If they're open October 1st, when are they due?
There's not really a set deadline necessarily. You can apply, you can complete the FAFSA through June 30th of the subsequent year. So you're actually filling out for the 2018-2019 award year starting yesterday. You can fill that out through the end of June in the next calendar year. But the dates you actually really want to be aware of are your school's priority filing deadlines and your state's priority filing deadlines. And those are really going to vary depending on where you live and which school you're going to. But, really a lot of aid is on a first come, first served basis. So it definitely benefits students and their families to fill out those forms, the federal forms, and any additional paperwork that your school requires as early as possible.
Oh, that's great. We will definitely make an effort at KBK Wealth Connection to get this up and posted sooner as opposed to later so people can start looking at this material. And I know often when you're having a conversation about finances, it's an ongoing conversation. So it can take a little bit more than a couple of days to work through, so to speak. So when, I have a certain reaction to the statement, parents must protect their children from college financing decisions. But tell me a little bit more about this myth and what you see as either the downside or the upside or a little bit of both when people buy into this idea that college kids need to be protected from finance decisions.
Sure. Well, I think it's something where you could probably have any statement that starts with parents must protect their children from blank. And I think most parents would probably agree with, most things that you're going to add there at the end of it. So I just think back to my own college experience and when I was deciding between schools, and I had narrowed down my list to 3 potential options. 2 private options, 1 state option. I remember distinctly sitting down in the kitchen having a discussion with my parents and saying, well, I'll go to the state option where I won't have to borrow any loans. And my parents had actually said they would buy me a car if I chose that option, as opposed to the private options where they would have to spend more, and thus that wouldn't be an option necessarily. So perhaps I was foreshadowing my future career in this space with the decision that I made then. And I remember my mom actually telling me to rethink my decision and go to the school that offered potentially the better program for what I was interested in, which was communications. So that's what I ended up doing. I didn't get the car. I did get about 5 digits worth of student loan debt afterward, but things sort of worked out in the end. And I think of my own situation as perhaps probably mirroring what a lot of families go through, which is wanting your child to make the best decision based upon education, based upon location, based upon fit, a lot of those other factors, but not necessarily based upon price or the amount of debt that they might take on. I don't know that that necessarily fits into a lot of individuals' quote-unquote definition for what the best might be. And I think that is potentially a pitfall that students fall into and families fall into when you look at the fact that students are graduating from school owing northwards of $37,000 worth of debt, and parents are borrowing a lot of money in loans as well to cover any tuition gaps that their children might have. So there's a lot of debt that is getting taken on that potentially parents feel like they might be either protecting their child from by taking it on themselves, or protecting their child from by not having the conversation in general to begin with, to say, hey, perhaps maybe it makes more sense for you to go to a less expensive school or a community college for a couple of years and transfer over, sort of different options like that, rather than focusing a little bit more on just what the best educational fit might be.
Do you think that this is part of the overall money silence in our society, that parents talk about all sorts of aspects of a college education but kind of don't really spend time talking about the money aspect? Do you think that's part of it, or is there something else at play here?
I think it's definitely part of it. Just from reading a lot of the things that you've written as well, I know many of the topics that people feel more comfortable talking about than talking about money. And then I think you sort of add in the layer of having those conversations with a teenager as well, which also from my own from my own experience talking about this with my parents, my mother tells me she was afraid to talk about anything with me for a few years there. So I think when you sort of look at obviously the taboo of talking about money and then having to deal with perhaps a less than receptive audience in a teenager, it definitely sort of all combines together.
I think that's a great way of thinking about it. It's like a double whammy talking to your teen. I can remember looking at colleges and the financial conversation not coming up either, and a car also being involved. I don't know whether that's some way to get a teenager to listen, but I do remember later on in life, much later, realizing, wow, my parents paid a lot for college, but I had no idea at the time. I had no awareness, which I'm not proud to say, but we certainly have broke money silence since then. So is there, before we move on to kind of tips and tools for people who are listening that have teenagers that are in this situation, or maybe college students that are in the middle of this situation, before we do that, is there any upside, is there any benefit to the parents protecting their children from the college financing discussions in your view, even if it's short term? Like, is there a silver lining?
I mean, it's a stressful experience in general when you sort of have, I guess, your future right in front of you. You have to pick where you're going to spend the next 4 years of your life, and perhaps what you want to do as a career for the rest of your life. That's a lot of weight to put on someone to begin with. And then if you factor in the idea that you're going to have upwards of $30,000 worth of debt to manage after you figure all of that out. There's definitely a mental toll that takes place because of that. So when you're protecting your child from that aspect of it, I think you can understand where some individuals come from in that respect.
So it's almost as if in the short run, by not talking about it, you're helping reduce your teenager's stress or everybody's stress. But in the long run, you may inadvertently, and in a very well-intended manner, increase their stress, because certainly the amount of student debt that people are carrying is very stressful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an in-the-moment decision. One thing that we've always talked about at ASA is the fact that choosing a college is an emotional decision to begin with, and to try to add or prescribe a dose of rational thought on top of it, like thinking about how much this is going to cost you now and how much this is going to cost you in the future, that's not always going to bubble to the top of the thought process.
It's a great point. So before we get into the tips that Ryan has for everybody, we are going to take a quick break. I'm with Ryan Lane of ASA. He's busting the myth parents must protect their children from college financing decisions. And we'll be back after this quick message.
Did you know that 44% of Americans would rather talk about politics, religion, and death than personal finance? And there's a real cost to this money silence, to society, your family, and the next generation. Kathleen Burns Kingsbury's new book, Breaking Money Silence: How to Shatter Money Taboos, talk more openly about finances, and live a richer life, explores the history of the money talk taboo and offers readers practical tips and tools for engaging in healthy financial communication. Pick up your copy today. Breaking Money Silence is available on Amazon and bookstores everywhere. Join the revolution at www.breakingmoneysilence.com.
So here I am with Ryan Lane of ASA, busting the myth parents must protect their children from college financing decisions. And we've just talked about kind of the up and down side of talking about money or avoiding these money conversations. And certainly there is a huge downside. Can you repeat that stat that you gave me, Ryan, about how much the average student debt is? It's very large.
Yeah, for the class of 2016, the average debt that they graduated with was a little bit above $37,000.
Wow. I can't even imagine, like, coming out of school. I mean, I was fortunate, right? But coming out of school and having that kind of debt and not being able to find a job, or that just seems so overwhelming. So I'm really glad organizations like the American Student Assistance Program is out there, and the program that I worked with and on and off for a while is saltmoney.org, which is a really great financial literacy site for college-age students that has a lot of fun stuff on it. And Ryan's in charge of what I would say editor of fun stuff.
I should put that on my business cards.
But let's get back to the topic at hand. What advice would you give to parents who are listening? I'm imagining it's more parents than teenagers, but maybe I have some teenagers in my audience. But parents about how they can broach these conversations with their children. What are the steps that you advise them to take if they want to make sure that they aren't overprotecting their children?
Sure. We talked at the top of the program how the FAFSA has just opened. I think one thing that many parents will do is just complete the FAFSA themselves for their children, or do it with a very passively interested child as part of it. I'll speak from experience there as well. This is something where you're going to fill out the FAFSA each year that you're in school and that you want to get aid. So in theory, I filled out the FAFSA 4 times. I remember 0 of those occasions. So it's definitely something, put a Saturday aside, put a few hours aside. It does take a little bit of time to go through the form, but sit down together, go through the form, go through the steps, have your child understand what information you're putting in the form. And definitely when you get the results from that form, you'll get your student aid report, which will outline your estimated family contribution for that. Talk through those options and what those numbers mean with your child so that they can understand that. So I would say that's one thing that families should definitely do. if you don't want to get into the weeds of going through a federal form with your child as well, just like with a lot of difficult money conversations that I imagine you would advise people to do would be to grab some time together, put it on the calendar, make an appointment to sit down and talk through some of these options and look at just what we've talked about here in terms of, all right, this is how much someone going to this college will graduate with in debt. Here's this big number, $37,000, whatever it is. Now let's break this down into, all right, you're going to repay this over 10 years, 120 payments. So this is the actual amount that you will have to pay each month when you graduate. It doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't go to that school. By no means is that what I'm saying. But it is something where you want to not be surprised when you hit that number, and you also want to do things while you're in school, like applying for more scholarships, finding free money, working while you're in school, doing other things that can limit the amount of debt that you have to take on, so you're better prepared post-graduation to handle that amount.
Those are great tips. I think something comes to mind. I recently wrote an article for a financial advising magazine, and I interviewed a bunch of parents about what they would do differently if they had to do it again in talking to their college-age kids. And a lot of it, obviously, was about college and college expenses. And one of the things that one of the gentlemen that I interviewed said, he would have sat down and would have tried to help his son have a realistic sense of the numbers. So in other words, not only, I love your tip, but not only kind of what it's going to cost you monthly in debt, which is a really important figure for people to have, but somehow to bring that to life. And one of the ideas he had that I thought was kind of cool, and maybe, this is something that people in the student loan industry know about, but the idea of also working out, like, okay, suppose you graduated, you have your own apartment. What typically would your apartment cost? What would your expenses cost? And then putting that number in your overall budget. Because what he found is his son, I happen to know this person, very nice gentleman, was able to just think, whatever the number was, oh, that's not a big deal. So he didn't have context. So do you have any idea? I mean, that's one way to put it into context, although you have to be, I imagine if you have an unwilling teen, that might be a drawn out affair. I'm wondering, is there a way in which you recommend that people can put it into context, or even in our conversation today, to think about how do you bring that home to a young person? Because I know at 18 or 19, I didn't really have a sense of what that number meant as much as I do now.
I think exactly the way that you've just talked about is one of the best strategies for doing something like that. I know something that we've done in the past is to look at what those dollar amounts can equate to that students might be more interested in than putting them toward the loan. For instance, we've talked a lot in the past about prepaying on your student loans to cut down interest costs, and how making one extra payment per year can save you X amount over the life of your loan. So for instance, if you make that one extra payment and it saves you $1,000 worth of interest, that's $1,000. That's a plane ticket and a trip to Europe or to Mexico or wherever else that might be more interested, that a student might be more interested in going in their post-grad life than just sending a bill to their student loan servicer. So definitely things like that where you can find that, I guess, common denominator.
I love that, because that just makes it real. You know what I mean? It makes it so much oh, wait, I can get a whole trip.
Yeah, absolutely.
Out of this versus I could pay this, which they, you still don't know what the ultimate decision will be, and it may be that they decide to take on that debt, but there's a way in which it gives a context. I also think, and this was the other question I was going to ask you, it kind of gives a fun factor. You know me, I like to have fun with finance, and I know finance gets a bad rap. So it almost feels like in some ways, okay, this is how much your payments would be. Let's think about, what are all the things you might want to buy that are at that amount or over the course of, paying that back, and trying to add some fun into it. Because I feel like a teenager, or you could even make a contest if there were a bunch of kids the same age, might be much more interested in that, and it might get them involved as opposed to the form, which is important,
Sure.
as well, but some sort of kind of more engaging way. And I know, at ASA and certainly with Salt Money, you guys are really great at that. So I love that tip. Any other thoughts before we kind of wind down today? These podcasts go so quick, Ryan.
I think we've covered a good amount of what I was hoping to talk about. I would say just from the parent standpoint, as well as you said, that's largely your audience too. Certainly something for them to be aware of, not just the student borrowing, but also the parent borrowing. We touched on that a little bit as well. So Parent Plus loans, which are the federal loan that parents can take on to cover a tuition gap. So that is something where the total amount outstanding there is over $80 billion.
Wow.
And well, when you put it in the context of the $1.4 trillion of outstanding student loan debt, then maybe the $80 billion doesn't seem as a lot, but that's certainly something that a lot of parents turn to as well. And just the point that I would make for that, if that's something that you're planning to do, have the conversation with your child about that so they know what you're taking on, especially if you're taking on that amount in lieu of your child taking on that amount. Certainly as you get older and you have less time to earn income to make up that money or to contribute to retirement savings or whatever your other financial goals might be, having that debt hang over you is definitely something that you want to be aware of. You should also be aware of the fact that the Parent Plus loan, it remains in your name. A common thing that we hear about are parents making agreements with their children to have their children pay off that debt for the parent once they graduate from college. And while that can sometimes work out well, sometimes it cannot if the student or child is struggling to make their other loan payments or spaces out on it or whatever the reason might be. The parent has to be aware of that because it is in the parent's name and it will be the parent's credit score that takes that hit, or if the loan goes into default or whatever bad things might happen as a result of that, you have to understand that responsibility as well.
Wow. I only have a cat named Avery, and she's not going to college, even though I would have hoped she would. So I feel fortunate that I don't have to necessarily have these types of money talks, although I have had them with my nieces and my nephews to try to support them and in making good financial decisions on going off to college. So, Ryan, you've been such a wealth of information today, and it's been really fun. Time flew talking to you about this. And I guess, if we had to reframe the myth, instead of saying parents must protect their children from college financing decisions, sounds like parents must communicate with their children about college financing decisions would be a great reframe. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Just have the open conversation, put it out there, make sure you're all aware of this consideration and the fact that it is something that you do need to think about in addition to school location, school offering, whatever other factors that might play into how you're deciding where to spend the next 4 years of your life.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ryan. Tell people where they can find out more information about your organization.
Yeah, you can visit us online at asa.org. That's American Student Assistance. Saltmoney.org, which Kathleen mentioned earlier as well. We have a ton of great information on that site around the FAFSA that we talked about, around the college financing process in general. We have a great modeling tool called our College Cost Planner, in which you can go in and you can put the amount that you expect to get from scholarships and the amount that you expect to take out in loans and from savings and so forth like that, and model that over the course of 4 years, because that's what you have to remember as well. It's not just making ends meet for the 1 year, it's making ends meet for however many years your child is going to be in school as well, which will certainly increase those numbers too. So again, you can find that on saltmoney.org. Check us out there.
Thank you so much. And thanks, Ryan, for breaking money silence with me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Breaking Money Silence, hosted by Kathleen Burns Kingsbury, a wealth psychology expert and founder of KBK Wealth Connection. If you like what you heard, then check out more podcasts at breakingmoneysilence.com or subscribe on iTunes.com. Need a fun, engaging speaker for your next event? Go to kbkwealthconnection.com and find out how to book Kathleen today. Be sure to share today's show so together we can break money silence for good.